and welcome to episode 4 of Learning Kitchen Live. As you can see, this is the home edition. My name is Jessica Burch. I'm one of the dietitians at Community Servings, and like many of you, I find myself working from home these days, so welcome to my kitchen. I'm really excited about this opportunity to share a recipe with you, maybe some nutrition information you're unfamiliar with, answer some questions, and maybe give you a little extra incentive to try this recipe out for yourselves at home, given that I'm going to be doing it right here in my own kitchen without any special equipment. So the recipe that I decided to make today is focused on trying to lower blood pressure with using food as medicine. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on foods that we know can actually lower your blood pressure. We'll talk a little bit about that as we're going through the whole demonstration. But we're going for a really big flavor without a lot of salt, tons of veggies, and proteins that will make your heart smile. So today's recipe is called Fennel tomato sauce poached tilapia. Tilapia, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a type of fish. And the reason that I picked tilapia is because it's available at lots of grocery stores. It's relatively inexpensive, and we're always trying to get as much fish into our diets as we possibly can. And so if you can find a way to incorporate more fish, that's great. And one way to do it is to find a fish that is easily accessible, right? Tilapia also has a very mild flavor, so it takes on sauces and dishes really well. The other thing about the dish is that it's poached, and for a lot of people they might say, eek, that's a skill set that I don't have. No worries whatsoever. I'm going to show you that poaching is really, really easy. All it means is that we're going to cook something low and slow in some sort of sauce or liquid. And that process allows whatever you're cooking to soak up all that yumminess and stay really moist and tender. The nice thing about fish is it doesn't take a very long time to cook. So we're going to kind of forget about the slow part. This will actually go fairly quickly, but we are going to be cooking on low heat. And the last thing I want to mention about the recipe just before we get started is that we are going to be focusing on incorporating a whole lot of vegetables. I chose fennel as the star of the show because a lot of people come across fennel in CSAs or farm shares, and they don't really know what to do with it. So this is a really good way to incorporate it into a really simple dish. That being said, if you don't like fennel, if you don't have fennel, you can take whatever veggies are hidden in the back corners of your refrigerator and add them to this dish, and it will work out fine. All right, so enough of the talking, or the introduction, I guess. I'm not used to talking the entire time that I'm cooking. Whenever I've done classes in the past, there's some questions going on while this is happening. Val and Beth, my colleagues from Community Servings, will be answering questions on the Facebook page if you have any. Please don't hesitate to type them in, and then I guess I'll just continue to chat with myself as we're going along. And for anybody that's just joining us now, my name is Jessica. I'm one of the dietitians at Community Servings, and this is Learning Kitchen Live, episode 4. All right, so let's get started with some vegetables. So what I've got here, I prepped a bunch of stuff ahead of time because I wanted to kind of focus on paying attention to everything that we're doing. So I've got some onions that are already cut. I've got a carrot that's already chopped up, and some zucchini that I already cut up as well. And those are going to be the base of our sauce with our fennel. So if you're unfamiliar with fennel, here she is. Ain't she pretty? We're going to use every part of it. So I tried to find a fennel bulb that had big fronds. Unfortunately, this was the biggest frond I can find. It's kind of a sad little guy. But we're going to use this as a garnish for our dish. You paid for the whole fennel, so use the whole fennel, right? This is delicious. You can add it to salads. You can use it as a garnish. You can put it on a bagel with some cream cheese for an extra pop of flavor. So we're going to start by just cutting that off. Actually, I'm going to take off some of these shoots first to get to it. And we're going to put that aside, and we'll use that a little bit later. Then we've got, well, I took off a few of them already, but we've got our our little shoots here. And these are edible as well. So as I said before, you paid for it, use the whole thing. We're gonna chop these up and include them in our sauce as well. So I'm just gonna cut these up really quick, the same way that you would cut up a piece of celery or a carrot. We just want to kind of make sure that when you're adding vegetables to a sauce, that they're all about the same size. The reason is we want to make sure that everything cooks evenly. If you've got things in lots of different sizes and all different shapes, it will still be delicious. It just might not cook quite as evenly. So if you can get it close to the same size, it'll make it a little bit better. Maybe not. I haven't done any experiments to see whether or not this is actually factual, but that's what I learned in culinary school, so we're gonna go with it. If you don't like cutting up vegetables and looking at a dish like this, or trying to think about incorporating more vegetables into things that you cook on a regular basis, is tough because you just don't feel like you have the knife skills or the time to cut up a lot of vegetables, use a cheese grater, use a blender, use a Cuisinart. All of those things are totally fine and will cut down on the cooking time. If you've got a small person at home that needs a job and you trust them with the cheese grater, or at least not to grate their fingers while they're cheese grating, hand them the cheese grater and a couple carrots and some celery and you'll be good to go. All right, so we're down to our bulb. And, oh, I forgot to mention, so I already cut it off. There's a little root part at the bottom that isn't actually very edible. I guess you could try, but don't worry about it. If we get rid of that part and eat everything else, we're good. So I cut that off, and then I'm just gonna show you. So I'm gonna cut this right down the middle. And if you look inside, can you see? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So it's kind of like a cabbage almost on the inside. It has all these different leaf layers and then the thicker core in the middle. So this core is definitely edible. I'm gonna cut it out because it'll just take a little bit longer to cook, and since this is a quicker dish, we don't wanna worry about that. So I'm gonna cut that out. And then just going to chop this up into little pieces about the same size as everything else that I was cutting, as I said before. Now, if you've never had fennel before, it has kind of a licorice-y flavor to it when it's raw. I love licorice. If you don't, then maybe this isn't gonna be your favorite thing raw. You can put it in, or when you cook it, the licorice flavor subsides, and what you end up with is this really lovely, earthy, sweet flavor from it, which is really wonderful in things like tomato sauces, or if you were gonna roast it or grill it. All of those things would give you the same flavor. Okay. Almost done here, and then we're gonna actually start cooking. Woof. And just for a check-in, if you're just joining us now, my name is Jessica. I'm one of the dietitians at Community Servings, and this is Learning Kitchen Live episode 4. We're doing a tilapia tomato sauce poached, or not a tilapia tomato sauce poached fennel, but a fennel tomato sauce poached tilapia. There's a tongue twister for you. And we're about to start cooking. So here we go. We've got all of our vegetables ready. So pan, heat. Good start. And I'm gonna start this on medium. And we're gonna just hold your hand over the pan for a few minutes to let it warm up. Once you can feel that warmth coming through, you know the pan's ready for the oil. If you put it in cold, it doesn't heat up evenly. We want it to heat up as evenly as possible. All right, so I just pre-measured my olive oil into this jar. I don't buy it in tiny little jars, though it would be cute. So I'm gonna just add it's about 2 teaspoons of olive oil to the pan. And just you know, make yourself look really fancy by twirling it around a little bit. Cover up that base, voila. And we're gonna start with the harder vegetables. So the carrot, crunchy, right? We're gonna start there. You can already hear it sizzling, or I can. I don't know if you can. We're gonna add in our fennel. Lots of delicious fennel. Oh my goodness. Now, if you're trying fennel for the first time and this seems like a whole lot of fennel, do half of one and see what you think. Save the other for soup. Maybe not in August, or I guess we're still in July, but yeah. And some onion. So I've got my carrot, my fennel, and my onion in here. I'm gonna give it a quick kind of mix around so the vegetables are evenly dispersed, and then I'm gonna let it sit for a second. If you stir a lot once you first put vegetables in, that actually cools down with the vegetables in the pan. And what we want is for things to get a nice browning, because we're trying to create a lot of flavor with just the vegetables. So while this is starting, let's talk a little bit about hypertension and blood pressure, because that's the nutrition theme for this whole class. So if you're unfamiliar with what high blood pressure or hypertension is, it's kind of hard to make the decision to make changes in the foods that you're eating or the things that you're doing based on that, right? So I always feel like the best place to start is explaining what it is. When we say that somebody has high blood pressure or is at risk for developing high blood pressure, that means that their heart is working extra hard to push blood through their body. And, you know, that might sound like, oh, heart's working extra hard, it's building up more muscle, it's getting nice and strong, it's going to keep me healthy for a longer time. But in reality, what happens is your heart works extra hard for sure. It does build up bigger muscle, but that can lead to heart problems, heart disease, heart failure. Also, if you think about where the blood is being pushed, it's going through your arteries. Think of arteries as a hose. If water is being pushed really, really hard through a hose, it can cause a little bulge to form. And if that bulge forms, then that can lead to a burst, which might end up being an aneurysm. We don't want that. It can lead to little gross parts of fat building up in your arteries, which is when we run into the stiffening of arteries, can lead to heart attack, stroke, all things we don't want. So if we can avoid those things by making small changes with the foods that we're eating, I think that's a pretty good deal, right? I always like to say pay the farmer, not the pharmacist. Let me say that again because I messed it up. Pay the farmer, not the pharmacist. If we can focus on putting the best food possible into our body, that will make a really big difference. Okay, so I've just let these vegetables sit here for a few moments. I'm going to give them a little stir. And then put them back down. All right. And the next thing I'm going to do, well, actually I'm going to let these cook for just another minute. Let them brown a little bit more before I add anything else into the pan. So let's chat for a moment about the different things that we can add to our diet that will actually help to improve your heart health, will likely reduce your risk of developing high blood pressure or hypertension, or if you have high blood pressure or hypertension, will help to make it a little bit better. So the first thing that we want to focus on is increasing the amounts of fruits and vegetables that are in your diet. Fruits and vegetables are the medicine of the natural world. They are full of fiber, which acts as a broom to sweep our body clean. It can help to reduce cholesterol levels, so why not include it, right? They're full of vitamins and minerals, and vitamins and minerals do lots of different things for us, but when we're talking about blood pressure, The ones that are most important are potassium, which this dish is loaded with because of the tomatoes. Potassium also can be found in dark leafy greens like collards, kale, Swiss chard, spinach. It comes to us from sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, bananas, avocados, oranges, lots and lots of sources for potassium. And if you can find some that you like and include them in your diet, it's going to make a big difference in the long run. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second because my vegetables are cooking down. They're starting to get a little bit opaque. They smell amazing. I'm sorry you can't smell them. And now I'm gonna add in my zucchini. Now, the reason that I didn't add the zucchini at the beginning is because it's high in, high in water. There's a lot of liquid stored up in zucchini. And if I put that in with the hard vegetables at the beginning, what would end up happening is they would all just get steamed. And we'd lose a lot of that yummy browning that happens when things are first sauteing. So now that those have got a nice little brown on them, I'm gonna put in my zucchini, or I already did, and let that start to brown up. So we've got a vegetable medley here for the base of our sauce. So we'll let that cook for a second. So we'll go back to vitamins and minerals. So I was talking about potassium. The other mineral that's really important for high blood pressure is magnesium. Unfortunately, this specific dish does not have any magnesium in it. However, if you don't like fish and you wanted to substitute, say, white beans, like cannellini beans, those are jam-packed with magnesium and would be a great alternative to the fish. I meant to say earlier, if you don't like fish, you can do the white beans, or you could do chicken as well. You don't have to do fish at all. This recipe works well with lots of different things. This sauce will take on pretty much whatever you decide to throw at it. So let me, we're getting some good, browning here. All right. Zucchini is gonna cook for just one more moment. And then a lot of the zucchini cooking will be done in the sauce. We don't want the zucchini to cook too much ahead of time because then it will just get very, very mushy. And that's not as tasty, right? Okay, so moving along. Now I'm gonna add in my garlic. So I've got some pre-crushed garlic here. And I always add the garlic right before I'm gonna add any liquid, so that it doesn't get overcooked, it doesn't start to burn. Garlic has a lot of natural oils in it, and as a result, it can burn really quickly. We don't want that to happen. So, can you smell it? No, sorry, but I can. Yum! That garlic is amazing. All right. So just cook that garlic for a few moments. And for anybody who's joining us right now, this is Learning Kitchen Live, episode 4. I'm Jessica, one of the dietitians from Community Servings, and thanks so much for tuning in. So we've got our sauce cooking, or our vegetables cooking, and now we're gonna start adding liquids. So the first liquid that I'm gonna put in here is balsamic vinegar. And vinegar is an excellent way to add a lot of flavor to foods without salt. There's essentially no calories to it, no salt, no sugar, and a ton of flavor. When you're adding vinegar to a hot pan like this, it's best to take a step back when you first pour it in because it sends up this bang of vinegary fumes that if they go up your nose or down your throat, they could kind of burn a little bit. I'm having a small experience of that right now, but it's all right, I'll survive. So I'm just gonna let that cook off a little tiny bit before adding anything else. But if you can see, gives everything kind of a nice little brown, yummy hue. It smells amazing. Okay. So our sauce is almost done. I'm gonna just add a can of crushed, no salt added tomatoes. And this recipe is going to be posted to the Community Servings Facebook page. In the recipe, it says that once you've added the tomatoes, kind of take a look at it and gauge whether or not you think it needs more liquid. It's really a preference at this point. We're going to let it simmer on really low heat. I think this could use a little bit of extra liquid just to thin it out a little bit. So I'm just going to add about a quarter cup of water. And give it a nice stir. Oh my goodness. This alone could be a meal in and of itself. Look at this. Actually, let me put this down so I don't drop it everywhere. But look, woo! I'm spilling some anyway. I'll pick up the camera and show you in a minute. But it looks amazing. All right, I'm burning things slightly. Okay, so we've got that. Now, the next thing I'm gonna add, if you were my mother, you would probably add peanut butter to this to cut the acidity of the tomato. I do that sometimes, but with this particular, and I know that sounds totally strange, but it really works, like a teaspoon of peanut butter. It's amazing. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon and a half of sugar. I think the flavor just melds a little bit better with the fish. So put that in and give it a little stir, and that's just gonna cut a little bit of the acidity. You can leave it out completely, and it will be fine. It's up to you. And now we're gonna add in our herbs. So here I've got, if you can see, I've got a mix. So I've got a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a tablespoon of oregano, and a tablespoon of basil. And then, unfortunately, all of my bay leaves seem to have gone through the process of being smashed by my 20-month-old son. So instead of 2 full bay leaves, I have some crumbles. But they'll be fine. I'll pick them out before we eat it. So I'm going to just put that in, give it a stir so that the spices and herbs are evenly distributed throughout. Voila, magic. I'm gonna get a pan cover. And just let this simmer on low for a few minutes to come together before we add our fish. All right, let me clean up after myself ever so slightly, and we'll get moving on to the next part. Okay, let me grab my fish. I considered leaving this out so it would be a very seamless move, but it's hot in here. I don't want this fish to go bad. Okay, so before we jump into the fish, let's talk a minute more about hypertension and how we're going to try to combat it with using food instead of medicine. Food as medicine. So we talked about vegetables. The next thing, that's probably the most important thing, to be perfectly honest, is the types of things you use to flavor your food. So I mentioned that we're using lots of sauteed vegetables, different flavors, to build layers and layers of flavors in our sauce. We used some vinegar, we used some garlic, a tiny bit of sugar, but that's not really going to add any flavor as much as it's just going to cut the acidity of the tomatoes. The reason that we want to try to avoid salt or cut back on salt is that Salt, when we have a lot of it in our body, it actually makes us retain water. And that extra water that's built up in our body, our kidneys can't process it fast enough. So it ends up staying in our blood longer, which means that there's more blood in our body, essentially, to push through our body, which means that our heart has to work harder. We want to give our heart a break. So we want to try to find some ways to cut back on the salt in the foods that we're eating. If you have hypertension or a risk for hypertension, the recommendation is to have 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day or less. So what on earth does that mean? Because unless you're a dietitian and you're thinking about these things all the time, you have absolutely no idea what 1,500 milligrams of sodium looks like, right? Well, it's a little bit less, or maybe more than a little bit less. See, I don't even know what it looks like. It's about 3/4 of a teaspoon. That's a very small amount of salt. And the thing is that unless you're preparing every single thing that you eat, from snacks to meals, all day, every day, you can't really control all of the salt that's going into the foods that you eat. So some ways to think about that, or ways to approach it, I suppose, are if you are cooking things at home, try to come up with other ways to flavor food. Use lots of different spices, herbs, vinegars, lemon juice, lime juice, garlic. All of these things can add a huge bang of flavor without the salt. If you're buying pre-made meals, look and compare when you're in the store. I know a lot of people don't like to look at food labels, but all you have to do is flip over and look at the salt or sodium content. What we want to try to find is foods that have less than 150 milligrams per serving. But then you also have to consider, if I'm looking at this bag of potato chips and I really think I'm going to eat the whole thing in one sitting, how many servings are in there? If there's 3 servings and it's 50 milligrams of sodium in one serving, then that's fine because it's 150 milligrams. But if it's 3 servings and there's 250 milligrams per serving, you're at 750 and you're halfway to the amount of salt you should have in a day. I'm not telling you can't eat potato chips. I love them. I'm not giving them up. But think about ways that you can look for one that maybe has a little less salt than the one that you normally choose. Think about how much you're eating in a day. Think about if I had a big old bag of potato chips today for a snack or at lunch, maybe I'm not going to have pretzels or popcorn or something later in the day, okay? The foods that have the most salt hidden in them are canned goods. So as I said, I was using a no salt added canned tomato, or canned crushed tomatoes. A lot of tomato sauces have tons of tomatoes in it. Yes, they have tons of tomatoes in it. Tons of salt in them. A lot of canned vegetables have lots of added salt in them as well. So look at them. Most companies provide different versions of all of the canned vegetables that they do. So they'll be their regular, and then there'll be their no salt added or their low sodium. If they have a no salt added, pick that one. Low sodium, there's no definition for that. It just means that there's less salt in it than their regular version. It could be like a pinch less, and they can technically say that it's low sodium. Just some thoughts. Deli meats are high in salt, so choose a low sodium option. Think about your snacks, as I said. If you buy frozen meals, pre-made meals, there's no shame in that. Just look and see if there's one that has a little less salt, or make sure that you're sticking to a portion size that's not going to give you more salt than you need, okay? And the last thing is thinking about where you eat out or order food from. So restaurants, takeout, fast food, they all want you to come back and buy more of their food. Rightfully so, that's how they make their living, right? But in order to do that, they have to make it absolutely delicious. And so they add extra salt because we love salt. So just think about what it is that you're ordering, how much of it you're eating. Does the place you're ordering food from offer a low salt option or a low sodium menu? And try to pick at least one item from that, okay? So those are my tidbits on that. Let's kind of move on to our fish. We'll get that cooking and we'll go from there, okay? So, as I said, we are doing tilapia today. And so tilapia, again, is a really accessible fish. It's available in most markets. It's inexpensive. If you're trying to incorporate more fish into your diet, this is a really good option. So if you look at it, and I don't know if you can see, so this part is actually the part that runs along the fish's belly, and so it's much thinner because they're storing all their bits, their organs in there, right? And this part, the thicker part, oh, there's a good visual. The thicker part is at the top. You can stick this straight into the sauce as is, cook it, it'll be totally fine. If you feel like being a little extra fancy and you've got a few extra moments on your schedule, you can try this. And so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do, though I think with this setup right now, it's not going to be the greatest visual. I apologize. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fillet and I'm going to cut right down the middle of this dark section here and separate the thin part from the thick part. Knife, cut, voila. Now I've got a thin piece and a thick piece. So the thin piece I'm going to just stick over here with my other thin ones because I prepped some of the fish ahead of time. And then this one, I'm going to actually cut it. I'm going to put it on the cutting board like this. I'm going to put my other hand on top to hold it in place and not cut my fingers off, hopefully while doing this demonstration, and cut through it lengthwise so that I end up with 3 pieces of fish that are all about the same width or thickness. Let's see how this goes. And for anybody who's just tuning in now, hi, I'm Jessica. I'm one of the dietitians at Community Servings. This is Learning Kitchen Live, episode 4, and we are cooking fennel tomato sauce poached tilapia. And here's our tilapia. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. See, I shredded it, but it's gonna taste really good, so it doesn't matter. All right, the reason that I did that is that by having pieces of fish that are all about the same thickness, they'll cook more evenly. I'm just cooking this for my husband and my 20-month-old. I don't think they'll notice, but you know, depends on who you're cooking for. All right, so I've got all my fish here on my plate, and what I'm gonna do is first, I'm gonna take, and here we go, a tiny bit of salt. So I've got about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in here with about a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And I'm gonna just sprinkle it on the fish to give it a little bit of seasoning. And this is the only salt I'm using in the whole dish. All right, so now the super fun part. Well, I guess that's all relative, but to me it's fun. So we're gonna take off the lid. Ooh, oh, How do I pick this up and show you without getting fish on everything? I don't, but I'll show you later. So I'm gonna take my fish and I'm gonna roll it up. I know, real fancy. Here come out the culinary skills. And I'm gonna put a little floret in to my sauce. All my little fish pieces are gonna go in here. Now again, plop that fish straight in. It doesn't matter, you don't have to take the time to do this. But it's just an added little extra Thursday afternoon, something nice to do. All right, stick that in. 2 more. Oops, that one kind of came undone, but I'm not going to battle the boiling sauce to retwist it. All right, fish twirl in the sauce. Let's see, can I correct? Okay, I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. I'll be right back. All right, so you want to see what we've got in here? Let's see if I can do this without dropping my phone directly into the tomato sauce, but I think it's worth a peek. Ooh, yummy. All right, so back where we're supposed to be, I'm gonna put my top back on, and we're gonna let that simmer for just 2 minutes. I told you, the sauce takes the longest. You stick the fish in, done, easy peasy, dinner. All right, so why fish? Why do we want to choose fish if we have hypertension or high blood pressure or at risk for developing high blood pressure? Because when we're talking about high blood pressure, we're also talking about all the different parts of our cardiovascular system. So our heart, our arteries, the way the blood flows, how things are being affected by the foods that we're eating. And fish, chicken, turkey, and vegetable proteins don't have the fat, the saturated fat that can make cholesterol levels go up, and that can affect your heart too. So we know from lots of research that if you increase the amount of fish and chicken and turkey in your diet and reduce the amount of pork and beef and lamb, you will reduce your risk of developing heart disease and high blood pressure. And if you already have those problems, you can improve them. See, food is medicine. It's awesome. Just think about what you're eating and what you're putting in your body, and it will make a huge, huge difference. So that doesn't mean you have to give up beef, pork, or lamb. Please don't. They're delicious. But think about how often you're eating them and what cuts you're eating. If you're getting hamburger, can you pick a cut or not a cut, it's not a cut at that point, it's a ground. Can you pick a portion of hamburger that is a lower percent fat? If you're going for a slice of beef or a piece of beef or a piece of pork or a piece of lamb, can you pick one that has less of that marbling, less of that white, less of that fat in it? Those are going to be the cuts that are going to be best for you. And if you can, increase the amount of fish that's in your diet. Increase the amount of chicken. Increase the amount of turkey. I forgot what the other bird was. Or choose vegetable proteins. So the other thing about fish is that they have omega-3 fatty acids in them, which are also very good for our heart. So again, if you can find a way to sneak some fish into your diet, it will make a big difference in the long run. Okay, so it's been almost 2 minutes. Oh yeah, these are almost done. So what I'm gonna do is grab my tongs. My little son likes to run around with these, chase people. They've been washed, but I guess you don't mind because I'm the one that's eating it. I just saw a question, can you use another white fish? Yes, of course. You can use any fish you want in this sauce. You can use, I'm trying to think of other fish. Flounder would do the little rolling very well, as would sole, but sole's pretty expensive, so you know, that's your choice. I would rather do my sole in a butter sauce, which is not exactly heart healthy approved, but yum. But any white fish would work really well in this. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be these little tiny florets. You can do like a full fillet or a full chunk or whatever. It'll be great. Okay, so these are all flipped over. The bottom side is cooked through, and we're going to not burn our hands. Put the lid back on, cook them for another moment, and let it finish. All right, so we talked about increasing vegetables. We talked about cutting back on salt and increasing the use of other ways to flavor food. We talked about the types of proteins that we're choosing, so picking the leaner proteins, the chicken, the turkey, the fish, or the vegetable proteins. There's one more thing that we want to try to focus on, and that I cheated and cooked ahead of time. And it's our accompaniment for this dish, and that is whole grains. And I'll show that to you in a minute because it'll just be easier. So whole grains means that it is the whole thing. It's been taken apart a little bit after it's been processed, or after it's been picked, so they don't actually stick an entire stalk of wheat into your whole wheat bread. No, they use the little seeds, right? But the difference between whole wheat and refined wheat is that essentially they peel the skin off of the whole wheat kernel, like you can peel the skin off of an apple. And so what you're left with is the inside of the wheat, or if we're using apple as an example, just the white part of the apple. And that's where all the starch, essentially the sugar and carbohydrate is. when you peel off the outside, you lose all the fiber, the vitamins, and the minerals. And so we're losing a lot of the good stuff that we need in order to be as healthy as we possibly can. So if you can pick a whole grain, more often than not, that's just going to give you more of those delicious, very important, very nutritious food, medicinal items, if that makes any sense. So I made a brown rice pilaf to go along with this, and that sounds really fancy, just like poaching sounds fancy. All it means is that I cut up some vegetables. I did a red pepper and a carrot and some onion. I chopped it up, I sauteed it in the pan, and then I added the water, and then I added the rice. And that's going to give my rice a lot more flavor. It's going to sneak in some more vegetables, and it's going to just make it extra yummy. I saw a question come in, can you cook the sauce ahead of time? Oh yeah, you totally can. This sauce will freeze really well. It can probably be in the refrigerator, I'd say, for 3 days or so ahead of time. But that's definitely a great way to approach it, especially if you're a really good planner. I'm a terrible planner, but if you can plan ahead of time and have your sauce and be all prepared to do your fish, go for it. So back to the whole grains. So there are tons of whole grains out there. There's brown rice, there's quinoa, which is very popular. There's amaranth, teff, millet. There's oat is a whole grain. Sorghum, I don't know, there's tons and tons. So if you can find ways to pick as many different whole grains and incorporate them into your diet, you're just giving yourself that extra boost. So if you usually pick the regular Triscuits, I guess Triscuits are technically whole grain. If you usually pick the regular wheat thins, go for the low sodium whole grain or whole wheat thins. If you go for, I don't know, what's another example? Potato chips. Can you do a whole grain? I mean, I've seen a lot of corn chips out there that now have like quinoa in them and all sorts of stuff. They're delicious. But again, think about the sodium content there. Pick a whole wheat bread. Try brown rice. If you don't like brown rice because you think it's it takes too long to cook or it's too hard, I always recommend doubling the amount of water. So if it says, well, it does say 1 cup of rice to 2 cups of water, then just switch it, just double it. So do 4 cups of water for 1 cup of rice, or maybe closer to like math, 2.5, 3 cups of water to 1 cup of rice. Taste it. If it's still too crunchy, add a little bit more water and cook it a little bit longer, and it will get a softer texture. It will never be the same as white rice, but it will be closer, and you might enjoy it a little bit more. Okay, so we are ready to find a bowl and plate up a feast. I'm so hungry. This is going to be such a good lunch. Sorry that you all can't participate. All right, so what I'm going to do is, got my bowl, and I'm going to do a scoop of my brown rice pilaf. So here you can see it's got my carrots and my bell peppers, and this is about 1/2 cup. The recipe has a nutrition facts label with it that incorporates 1/2 cup of rice. And then, oh gosh, that smells really good too. I'm hungry, guys. And then, let's see. I'm gonna just take some of my fish. Ooh, yum. And a scoop of my sauce. And because I said we were gonna be fancy, and I'm not gonna go back on that, I'm gonna throw a few of my little fennel fronds on top. And, wait, oh, where is it? Can you see it? Woohoo! Lunch for me. So I hope you could see that was a really easy, really quick way to make a very delicious, hearty, maybe not the best for a hot day in July meal, but it smells amazing. Please let me know if there's any other questions. You can put them through, and I will be able to definitely see them right now. If you've had questions earlier, hopefully Beth or Val have been able to answer them. I'll wait a minute to see if anything comes through while I'm gonna sample my gonna be hot. Whew. Sample my deliciousness right here so you can see that it's not poisoned. Oh yeah. It's gonna be a good afternoon. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me this week for the home edition of Learning Kitchen Live. Again, I'm Jessica from Community Servings. It was great to cook with you. I hope you learned some things and will really seriously give this recipe a try at home. Because as you can see, my home kitchen, a pan, a knife, a cutting board, done. All right, have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Bye.